Hello, and welcome back to Troy Story, a podcast for the Collar City, where we explore the history of Troy, New York, one conversation at a time. I'm your host, John Salka. Today, we're dropping part 2 of our interview with Amanda Tobias, educator and 3+ decade resident of Troy's Lansingburgh neighborhood. In the second half of our interview, we wade into the story behind Amanda's decision to run for city council in 2019, the controversial but ultimately necessary closure of the Lansingburgh pool, the importance of young people getting involved in local elections, her favorite things about Troy, and what she wants to see happen in the community during the next 10 years. Please stick around after our chat with Amanda for a preview of a very special episode we're working on for later this year and how you, our fair listeners, can be part of the show. We'll be asking for memories directly from listeners like you to revisit a major concert in Collar City history. As always, just a reminder to visit TroyStoryPod.com to get the latest on upcoming chapters and to sign up for weekly email updates where you'll get notified as soon as new episodes are available. Also, don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, YouTube, TikTok, and other social media platforms. Find us using @TroyStoryPod. Lastly, please don't hesitate to share your ideas, suggestions for guests, or some feedback on the show. Drop us a line at mail@TroyStoryPod.com. All right, let's jump back into the second half of our chat with Amanda Tobias. So how I met you was probably through your decision to run for city council. What year was that?
2019. Remember, because it's also the same one. Because I did a campaign on a broken ankle. I had fallen down some stairs and was in a boot for most of my campaign. But yeah, 2019.
How did that come to pass? Had you had a passing interest in politics or public service?
I mean, it's kind of always been at the back of my mind. It's something that, like, my dad has always worked in government in some form. And even, like, growing up, we would kind of work on campaigns. I use the term loosely, work on campaigns as much as you can work on a campaign at 10. Like, I stuffed a lot of envelopes, stood in a lot of places holding a sign, gave a lot of people voter reg packets. But I mean, I thought it was the coolest thing ever.
That's like foundational campaign work. So you were getting it in early.
Yeah. But at the time, Erin Tita, she used to be on the city council, and I think she was a county legislator too. She's like, hey, we really need somebody to run for city council for this district, and I think that you would be a good choice. So I threw my hat in the ring, and yeah.
What do you remember about that campaign? Obviously, other than the broken ankle.
I would say it was a very long, difficult campaign, but only I had, as far as running my own campaign, I had no real experience with running one. I was like, I mean, yeah, sure. I thought it was really just kind of knocking on people's doors saying, hey, vote for me.
I think that's all it is.
But it was a lot of knocking on doors and telling people, hey, vote for me.
Sure.
We were running, there's a lot of candidates running citywide, and there was some hot button issues that were not so popular down here in Lansingburgh that kind of made things a little bit more difficult. So.
Do you remember what the issues were?
Sanctuary City and the pool.
Oh, the Knickerbocker pool.
Yes.
The Knickerbocker pool.
Those were the two.
I meant to ask you about that earlier. Like, when you were a kid,
we went to the pool.
So you went to the pool often at Knickerbocker Park to go swimming.
My youngest brother, he was a lifeguard there for many summers. He learned to be a lifeguard there, and then he came back and worked at the pool for many summers. So,
do you have any specific memories of swimming at the Knickerbocker pool?
Not really. I feel like the water slide. That's the one with the water slide. Yeah, because we kind of popped around to a bunch of different pools. So
Knickerbocker pool, R.I.P.
Yeah, R.I.P. Hopefully it'll come back at some point.
You know that thing was like built in the 50s.
Oh yeah, it's very old. I like many things in Lansingburgh, but
what about the Knickerbocker pool was such a hot button issue?
People were mad
that it closed.
There was no pool anymore. And I think but also people don't understand the intricacies of the Knickerbocker pool in comparison to the South Troy pool, because the city doesn't actually own the Knickerbocker pool, right?
The city doesn't own the park.
They don't own the park where the pool is, and that's where there was a lot of
The issue with the Knickerbocker pool, and I can say this because I worked for the city at the time, was that the Knickerbocker pool was literally falling apart.
Right.
And the difference between the South Troy pool and the Knickerbocker pool is that the South Troy pool is a concrete pool, where the Knickerbocker pool is a steel shell pool. It's essentially a giant metal bathtub that's in the ground, and the ground was built up around it. And the metal had rusted to a degree that there was concerns that the pool itself was going to crack open when people were in it, and the water would rush out. Imagine swimming in like a giant bathtub and the side ripping open and just rushing in,
And then people would be like stuck between the lining and the ground. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, there's essentially all the filtration. There's equipment around the inside of it, all the pipes and stuff. So that was the big issue with the Knickerbocker pool. Yeah. But you're saying when you were knocking on doors,
South Troy is getting their pool back. How come we're not getting our pool back? Yeah, they're very upset about the pool.
Yeah, totally. What else do you remember about the campaign?
I learned a lot. And kind of, it's what got me more involved in like city affairs, I guess. Kind of the jump off point to where I am now.
So you felt like that plugged you more into things that were actually happening. Even though you grew up here, that doesn't necessarily, like anywhere where you grew up, it doesn't necessarily just imbue you with the sense of knowledge of like everything that's
going on now.
Right.
Yeah. So I think like it kind of made me more in the know. It made me more involved. Like one of the things I do now is I work the polls. Like on election day, this past election primary, I hang out at one of the voting polls and
check voters in.
Is
you mentioned that's perhaps from your dad's, public service, etc. Is that something that you see yourself continuing to do? Is that like an ongoing interest, and do you recommend it to anybody else?
I mean, like I love being involved and knowing what's going on. And I recommend to anybody, like if you want to ignite change, I always say that this might be a hot take, but it's like, I personally feel change does not come from presidential elections. Change comes from your local government and your local politics. So if you're concerned about what your kids are learning in school, vote in your school board elections, vote on the school budget, vote on your library trustees, because those are people that are making policy and making decisions that affect your everyday life.
I don't think that's a hot take.
Okay.
I think that's a pretty commonly held position by a lot of people but
a lot of people don't vote in local elections because they think they don't matter. And I think that they are more important than voting for the president.
Because they have such an immediate
such an immediate impact on you and your day-to-day life. Like New York, they have their own set of laws. Like states still have their own rights. So yes, you can vote for the president, but New York still has their own set of state rights. And even like Lansingburgh, things like, people are like, Lansingburgh, you should join with Troy City Schools. You guys should be one school district. If you don't like that, vote on the school board. It's actually in the New York Constitution that Lansingburgh is its own separate school district, if you didn't know that.
I did not.
Yeah. They put it in the Constitution. Lansingburgh, I'm pretty sure it's the only one that I've ever heard of. Lansingburgh is not a town. It's not a hamlet. It's not a village.
It used to be a village, but it's not anymore.
It's like a neighborhood inside of a larger city that has its own school district. And we have a post office.
Well, because it's a separate zip code, right?
Listen, I'm just trying to give us wins where we have a school district and a post office.
I did not know that. I'll have to look into that. It's a good point to make that the city of Troy is 11 square miles, and there are two independent school districts, two independent public schools districts. And
and Lansingburgh is like, not everyone who goes to Lansingburgh is from Troy, if that makes sense. Like we have kids that are in Brunswick and in Schaghticoke that are also in Lansingburgh school districts.
Right, because it's the nearest school district to attend as a student. Is that how that works?
I feel like school district lines are very like whoever they decide to cut them. So, yeah.
Like what you hear? Well, then it might be time to give us a flattering review. Reviews are the best way to make the magical podcast algorithm suggest our modest little podcast to other listeners. If you're feeling extra generous, please share this episode with a friend, family member, or that special person in your life. They'll thank you for it, and we will be forever in your debt. Troy Story, a podcast for the Collar City, streaming everywhere you get your podcasts. You ran for city council in 2019, so you were still, what, in your late 20s at the time?
I was 29.
I guess my question is the importance of young people being involved in community and civic affairs, not just broadly, but specifically people who are 18 years old can register to vote for the first time or deciding to get involved in things that are happening. I mean, do you have a message to, as a teacher and as a former candidate for elected office and a Lansingburgh graduate and all these other accolades that you have, do you have something that you would say about the importance of being involved as a young person?
Yes. Especially if this is the community that you love, this is the community you plan to be a part of for however long. Like, I've lived in Lansingburgh for most of my life, and this is the community that I love. You should want to see it be better, and you should want to see change for the good. And in order to do that, you need to be an active participant in your community. And one of the ways to be an active participant is through voting.
But even more than that, like
Right.
specifically from a young person's perspective, I mean, what would you say to somebody why they should pay attention to what's actually happening in their community and why it's important to them as a young person? I know a lot of people end up leaving where they grow up, or excuse me, a lot of people end up leaving where they grew up when they decide to go to school, or they move away and they start a family somewhere else. But I think upstate New York, there's a lot of people that they live where they grew up.
I think part of it, like I said, if this is the community you love, but also if this is where you intend to be rooted and where you intend to be planted, or you just want to make a better community for yourself now or for the people who are going to be here in the future. That takes being involved. Like, I know that we have monthly neighborhood meetings at the Boys and Girls Club, not largely attended.
And it's usually an older crowd.
An older crowd.
I'm saying that very politely.
Yep, older crowd. People who've been here for a very long time. And I think there might be an attitude with young folks that kind of like, well, what I do doesn't matter. It's not going to change anything. I have all these older people who are already doing the thing. They're not going to be here forever. And we need the next generation and the new set of people to kind of rise up and be like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to make this happen.
And what would you say to those people? Like, how should they get involved? Where should they start? Is there somewhere you would...
If you're like, I don't show up to a neighborhood meeting, they are, I want to say, the first Tuesday of every month at the Lansingburgh Boys and Girls Club. You'll get to meet some of your neighbors that you might not know. They usually have like one of the community police officers come, some of the code enforcement people come. So kind of just even for information to kind of figure out, oh, what's going on? I think those neighborhood meetings are a good place to, like, if you're like, I don't really want to get involved, that's a good base to start. Like, hey, I want some information. I kind of want to see what's going on. That's a good place to start.
Got a question? Have a suggestion? We want to hear from you. Drop us a line at mail@troystorypod.com. You can always find us on social media, including YouTube, Instagram, Threads, Facebook, TikTok, and even the digital wasteland known as X, formerly Twitter. So we've talked about a lot.
Indeed.
A lot. We've covered a lot of ground. What is your, as someone who essentially has lived here their entire life, what is your favorite part about Troy, favorite thing of Troy, Lansingburgh, obviously being part of the city? Is there something that you really enjoyed perhaps growing up, or something that you really love or enjoy now about the city?
One thing that I absolutely love and I always tell people about and always invite them to is the farmers market. I think that it is one of the best features about Troy's. We have a farmers market that is free all year around. And I'm always like, hey, have you ever been to the farmers market? Do you like to buy local produce? Do you like to support small businesses? You should come to the Troy's farmers market. And I love it even more in the summer because I feel like it really brings the whole community together. Like, because you have your vendors out in the street and you have people going into the shops. And so I really love that aspect because I feel like I think the farmers market is kind of embodying the community of Troy in a way, if that makes any sense.
What's your favorite vendor? That's a loaded question.
It really is. Depends on what I'm trying to buy. But you cannot go wrong with Bat and Kill Creamery. They have really good chocolate milk. They have really good chocolate milk and really good ice cream. Those are like that's. I would say that's my number one.
I'm personally partial to Placid Baker because
I do love the Placid Baker
because they just have the best bread.
I do love the Placid Baker. That's a good one too.
Pretzels.
I like
bread.
I like Bard and Baker too.
Bard and Baker has some good stuff
because I like their bobas. They have the fruit bobas and not the tapioca ones.
They have some great vegan desserts that they always have that my son always likes. So we usually get like one or two of those. You know, he picks one and then I, of course, pick another one so that we have two of them. I like Baba Duck. I don't know if you've had Baba Duck.
I have not, but my brother has, and he really enjoyed it. I go to the farmer's market more to eat food, and then the shopping is like in between.
Sure. I also like and I cannot remember the name of the actual business, but the pickle guy. We call him the pickle guy.
Oh, I know exactly who you're talking about. I don't know what his name is either, but the pickle guy. Yeah.
And he has just
They have all the different types of pickles.
Everything.
Yes.
So good. So good. That is a must-hit vendor every time
right.
we go to the
You can't go wrong with there's something for everyone at the Choice Farmers Market.
Totally. Anything else you can think of when you think of just Troy, like that if you had someone to come visit, obviously the farmer's market, but just like things, experiences that you want.
Trying to think the things we do. My sister-in-law, she's from Florida, so I'm trying to think of the things that we do when she comes. We go get ice cream. We go to Snowman's. That is a Lansingburgh institution. Opening day, it's always cold, always snowy. People are lined up.
Around the block.
We love Snowman's here.
Uh-huh.
So they have the best sherbet. The best. Hands down, best sherbet.
They are, I think, always ranked.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, we are Snowman's people here. We love Snowman.
And it's super close.
Right.
To where we are right now.
And my friends who live in like Colony or Clifton Park, they'd be like, oh, hey, we're going to Snowman's. You want to meet us? Absolutely. There's never a bad time to go to Snowman's. never a bad time to go to Snowman's. And then I would say when I think of like Troy as a place, I think of the community feel, like especially specifically in Lansingburgh too. Like I said, like being able to have that full circle moment. Even when I was in high school, a lot of the teachers that worked in Lansingburgh were Lansingburgh graduates. They had like gone to Lansingburgh, they lived in Lansingburgh, that's where they raised their family, and they come back to teach here, and kind of having that community-minded feel is something that I really enjoy and really value.
What's the most important thing that you would like to see happen for the city of Troy in the next 5 to 10 years?
Which might be a more abstract idea, but I feel like Troy sometimes is very disjointed in its like separate neighborhoods. And kind of how people like in Lansingburgh, we're like, no, we're Lansingburgh, we're not Troy or South Troy. No, we're the South Troy, not actual Troy. Kind of making the community that we feel in our own specific neighborhoods to be citywide, to not be these like isolated neighborhoods.
Which is interesting because the city, and I said this in a previous interview, I think it was with former Mayor Pattison, at least along the river, like what he called the river wards, but I call the flats. You never really leave the city. It's all it's all contiguous blocks. So it's not like you're driving in a neighborhood and then you kind of leave and then you enter another neighborhood. It just kind of blends from South Troy to South Central to Little Italy to downtown to North Central to Lansingburgh.
But like I'm sure if you ask somebody from Lansingburgh, I can firmly tell you that Lansingburgh ends at 101st Street. Once you get past 101st, you are no longer in Lansingburgh. You are in North Central. And I don't know where North Central is because I'm not from North Central.
Sure.
But like, so kind of those community mindsets, like just making them for the broader scheme of things, like more one Troy. Because I do feel like sometimes people in I call them the bookends of Troy. So maybe South Troy and us kind of sometimes feel a little neglected, kind of like we're not part of the city, but we are. So,
yeah, neighborhood identity is important, but ultimately you're part of a larger community, and the city's not that big.
It's not.
It's only 11 square miles, and we have all this great stuff. We have the Hudson River. We've got the beauty of the downtown. We've got the history of all the different neighborhoods. I mean, up in here in Lansingburgh, it's Herman Melville House, totally. Just there's like a lot of really fascinating characters and people from past, present that you can celebrate. and it often doesn't. It gets lost in the sort of parochial.
Right.
Well, I'm from Lansingburgh, so
It'd be like that sometimes. And I want us to be, like I said, yes, to maintain our community identities, because that is important, but kind of have more identity with the city as well.
anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. I think I'm good. Yeah.
Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Anytime. It was fun.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much to Amanda for being our 4th ever guest on the pod. She was very generous with her time and sharing her own story, and I hope that you enjoyed hearing her perspective on the Troy community. It's been 4 months since we launched our Little Local History podcast, spotlighting the people of the Collar City, and the response has been truly overwhelming. Thank you to all of our guests so far, including Amanda, former Mud Daddy Flats owner Dan Fremont, former Troy Mayor Mark Pattison, and previous Deputy Mayor Chris Nolan. I am humbled to be able to capture their stories and share them with listeners like you. To everyone who listened to chapters 1 through 4, thank you, thank you, thank you. We are already closing in on 2,000 downloads. Not too shabby for a niche local history podcast like ourselves. And we have some very excellent guests planned for May, June, July, and beyond. All previous episodes are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Now, as promised, here is a preview of a very special chapter of Troy Story, a podcast for the Collar City, currently under development.
You guys having some fun tonight? It's like we got ourselves a few sweaty fuckers here tonight, yeah?
The date was March 15th, 1989. Hordes of heavy metal fans descended on Troy, New York to see the mighty Metallica at the RPI Fieldhouse. The band was rampaging across America on their Damaged Justice tour in support of their latest studio album, And Justice for All. And the Collar City stop would become something of a noteworthy show from that era in the band's history. By the time Metallica landed in Troy that year, they had already established themselves as one of the fastest, most aggressive bands on the planet. They were also fresh off a live televised performance at the Grammys just 3 weeks earlier, including that now infamous loss to Jethro Tull.
I was in Title 1 if you didn't know, and that's my favorite Jethro Tull song.
Yes, that Jethro Tull, for Best Hard Rock / Heavy Metal Award. The Troy gig would be Metallica's first and only concert in the Collar City before they exploded into megastardom with the release of their self-titled LP, known as the Black Album, in 1991. The concert showcased the ferocity of not just the band, who tore through tracks off their first 4 albums, Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, and the aforementioned And Justice for All, but also the fans who packed the RPI Fieldhouse to the rafters, pumping fists in the air, screaming along to every word of every song, and generally losing their fucking minds. You might be asking, how do I know this? Well, because the entire concert is on YouTube, thanks to a dedicated fan who managed to sneak in a video camera to capture the show from start to finish. Take a look at the beginning of For Whom the Bell Tolls, and you'll see the faithful metal masses going absolutely ballistic. The video link is in the episode notes.
Let's put your top down for Ride the Lightning. Fucking scream along with us for the title For Whom the Bell Tolls.
So, did you see Metallica at the RPI Fieldhouse in 1989? We would love to hear from you for a special episode we're working on. What do you remember about the concert? How far did you travel from? How old were you at the time? Who did you come to the show with? Do you have a special memory from that night? Did you meet the band? Do you have any photos, posters, or ticket stubs from the concert? Help us revisit and celebrate this once-in-a-lifetime show for a special upcoming episode of Troy Story, a podcast for the Collar City. Call 518-285-0831 and leave us a voicemail with your story. We just might use it in the show. You can also email us your memories from the gig at mail@troystorypod.com or by visiting troystorypod.com/Metallica. Until next time, love yourself, love one another, and may Pod save Troy. Oh, and stay metal. Troy Story, a podcast for the Collar City, is hosted, written, edited, and produced by me, John Salka. Our theme music is by Stephen J. Goldman at Four Legs Records. Like what you heard? Please give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to Troy Story, a podcast for the Collar City. This is incredibly helpful for getting others to find our show. Want to know more? Visit TroyStoryPod.com to see upcoming episodes, guests, and bonus content. Thanks for listening. The views or opinions expressed by guests are their own and not of the host or Troy Story, a podcast for the Collar City.